Hello and welcome to this lesson on tools and technologies in learning design. From past lessons, you should hopefully remember that instructional design has many different stages to help guide learners through planning, creating, and evaluating their work. You should also remember that besides using the instructional design process to make lessons and larger training systems, there are many different types of learning products that designers can make. Depending on the product that's being created, designers must make many critical choices about what tools and technologies to use. These choices can be difficult to make because there are many tools and technologies, and worse yet, they are always changing and evolving. This session introduces some of the many different technologies you may use in instructional design when creating different learning objects. It will help you make better decisions about the learning object you'd like to create for your major project. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe how educational technologies aid the communications process, to research and to critically assess tools and technologies that can aid you in the design process, and to appreciate the vast amount of different technologies that designers must choose from. An obvious question that I ask early in educational technology courses is, what is an educational technology? It seems like an obvious question, but I often get many different answers, each of which are often right in their own context. In the field of educational technology, researchers often focus on emerging technologies that are used in instruction and learning. Their focus is therefore often on creating and evaluating new tools and researching their impact on teaching and learning. In this context, an answer to the question, what is an educational technology, might be, an educational technology is a new tool that is introduced to learning environments to support teaching and learning. This definition might be a bit too specific, however, as it tends to focus on whatever tools are modern and emerging. A lot of educational technology literature, therefore, has a very short lifespan, meaning that it goes out of date when tools are no longer new or relevant. Getting a deeper and more critical understanding of what an educational technology is requires that we ask further questions. For example, we might ask, what do we mean by education, and what do we mean by a technology? There may be many answers to the questions, what is learning, and what is technology? Since we stated in previous lessons that communication is an integral component of education, one way to answer these questions is to use some basic communications theory. Here, we have a person on the left communicating a message to the person on the right. The communicator must choose a medium like speaking orally, writing a message on a piece of paper, or even drawing a picture. For each medium, the communicator must code the message, that is, use language, drawings, images, and sounds which represent the internal concept or feeling that they want to share. Coding requires that the communicator use a structured and shared system of meaning. In this case, they'll use written language by writing two symbols on a piece of paper with a red pen. By writing a B+ on a piece of paper, the communicator can now store the message over time. For example, this might be a teacher marking a student's essay, so they set the essay aside to return to the student another day. The next day, the teacher takes the essay to school and gives it to the student. In this way, the message was transferred to the receiver from a different location. The student then decodes the symbols, that is, they read the grade and give it meaning. Depending on who the receiver is and the context of the assignment, the receiver may filter this grade in different ways. If they're used to low grades, it might be a high mark and make them happy, but for an exceptional student, it might make them upset. This example shows the basic stages that all messages go through: coding, storage, transfer, and decoding. It also shows how technologies can improve communication in the different stages. For example, the paper and pen allowed the message to be stored until the next day and transferred to another location, which would not have been possible if the teacher could only speak directly to the student without any technology. Using this model, we can therefore define an educational technology as something that facilitates or improves the coding, storage, transfer, and decoding of a message. According to this working definition, each of these items is an example of an educational technology. Cave painting allowed people to share images of what they saw in ways that stored the images so they could last over time. Paper and writing utensils allowed people to draw and write messages that lasted over time and could also be moved from place to place. Presses, printers, and copiers increased the efficiency and speed of writing and drawing on paper. Compared to cave painting, chalkboards and whiteboards increased the efficiency and ease of drawing, writing, and erasing on a wall, as did overheads and LCD projectors. Compared to drawing and painting on walls and paper, the camera made it much easier to capture images which were also much better representations of what the communicator saw. Video cameras then made it possible to visually, and later audibly, communicate periods of time rather than instances of time. With the invention of the phonograph, it became possible to store and transfer the human voice, and technologies that were to follow, like the CD and MP3, increased sound quality and made it easier to capture, store, and transfer recordings. I could go on, but I'm hoping that you now see how each of these technologies not only enabled more efficient and accurate ways of communicating, but also of educating. In addition to using communications theory to explore the meaning of educational technologies, there are many other technologies we use that we don't often associate with education. Some of these tools are so ubiquitous in most cultures that we often take them for granted, but when they aren't present in the learning environment, you'll quickly recognize how important they are to teaching and learning. For example, if you ever teach or travel in poorer countries, you may encounter situations where there are no desks or chairs, where the classroom has no door or even no building, or where lights or electricity are absent or not dependable. For a quote-unquote first world teacher trained in classroom-based teaching, you may quickly realize that these tools and technologies play a large role in instruction and learning. And when we think even more generally, it's clear that there are many other tools and technologies that can influence the quality of teaching and learning. For example, in some places you may find yourself without adequate plumbing or transportation, where students don't have access to adequate water or clothing to support their hygiene, or where they aren't able to play sports or games they love. Obviously, including these technologies in our discussion of educational technology complicates the term's definition, but it's important to recognize that the boundaries between the technologies that are educational and non-educational are defined by us, are often vague, and can be easily problematized. Now that our definition of educational technology is a bit more complicated, another important question is, what makes an educational technology good? Essentially, good educational technology should have a high return on investment, meaning that it should have a high impact on learning while not costing too much time or money to implement. A good educational technology must therefore have a meaningful and measurable impact on learning. For example, it might impact the efficiency and effectiveness of coding, storage, transfer, or decoding of information. Or it may impact learning in other ways, like improving memorization, critical thinking, learner empowerment, skill and value acquisition, and so on. A good educational technology must also be easy to use and implement. For example, there must be a low investment of time to learn and relearn the technology. The technology must also not disrupt the learning process. For example, not like cell phones and Facebook, which are often disruptive in the classroom. The technology should also be relatively inexpensive. And lastly, the technology should be compatible with people and other tools in the design and learning process. We are now going to shift away from defining educational technology to looking at types and examples of the tools and technologies used in the design process. The word tools is fairly vague in instructional design literature. For example, you may find the following being referred to as tools: process design models like ADDIE, administrative and planning documents like questionnaires or checklists, software like Word, Camtasia, or Articulate, and hardware like tablets, computers, and video cameras. Because we covered design models and evaluation documents in other lessons, for the purposes of this lesson, we're going to focus on the software required to make the various learning products you may want to create as a learning designer. You might use many different types of applications at different times throughout a project. For example, you might use different planning, communication, multimedia, online, or coding software. Depending on the product you want to create and the delivery method you choose, you need to make decisions about which software you'll need. In the next several slides, I'll mention several different applications. It's a good idea to make note of the applications to help you in deciding and planning your major project. It's also worth mentioning that although I often mention programs that cost money, in almost all cases there are open source alternatives. If I don't explicitly mention a software as open source, see alternative2.net for suggestions on potentially free software. When planning, designers may use several programs like Word or LibreOffice for creating analysis, design, and evaluation documents. They may use Excel and LibreOffice for creating budgeting and evaluation spreadsheets. They may use Project or Project Libre for planning and scheduling people and resources. They may use Access or LibreOffice for managing and delivering data. They also may use OneNote or Evernote for making and organizing notes. When creating text documents, designers may use several programs, including Word or LibreOffice, for writing manuals, lesson plans, scripts, and so on. Adobe Illustrator or Inkscape for designing one-page brochures and posters. Adobe InDesign and Scribus for designing multi-page booklets, manuals, and ebooks. Adobe Acrobat or Qt PDF for publishing PDFs. Or iBooks Author or Calibre for ebook authoring and conversion. When creating audio files or music, designers may use several programs including GarageBand or Audacity for audio clip editing and recording, or Logic, Sonar, or Reason for music recording and production. When creating and editing graphics, designers may use programs like PowerPoint or LibreOffice for making presentation slides, Photoshop or GIMP for manipulating raster images or images with pixels, or Illustrator and Inkscape for manipulating vector images or images with lines and dots. When creating and editing videos, designers may use several programs including Camtasia or Cam Studio for screen capture and editing, Camtasia, iMovie, or Movie Maker for lecture capture and editing, Adobe Premiere or Final Cut Pro for video production, or Adobe After Effects for making special effects. When creating interactive media, designers may use programs like Articulate or CourseLab for making interactive content with functionality like drag and drop, tabs, timelines, labeled graphics, and glossaries. Or Adobe Flash, which is the old school way of creating learning objects from scratch. It's important to note that HTML5 will be replacing Flash if it hasn't already. For online applications, designers may use several programs and platforms like Blackboard or Moodle for course and learning management, WordPress or Tumblr for blog management, Drupal or Joomla for content management, or Qt FTP or FileZilla for file transfer to and from servers. Lastly, for coding applications, designers may use several programs and platforms like Dreamweaver or Aptana Studio for web development, Visual Studio or Aptana Studio for software development, or AppCelerator, PhoneGap, or Xcode IDE for mobile application development. As you can see, there are many applications to choose from depending on the type of learning products you want to design. In our course, you'll be encouraged to try your hand at creating videos, graphics, text documents, and online web pages, so you'll get a chance to try several of them. You may need to work with other applications as well, depending on your major project. Thankfully, there are fewer types of hardware that you may need to use. For electronics, designers, teachers, and learners may use several different technologies, including computers, e-readers, tablets, mobile devices, internet servers, LCD or overhead projectors, interactive screens, televisions, stereos, photocopiers, and so on. For non-electronic hardware, the designers, trainers, and learners may use flip charts, chalkboards or whiteboards, binding machines, and so on. Lastly, remember that there are often physical tools that we sometimes take for granted as teachers and designers. As designers, we need to be explicit about all necessary tools that we need to successfully implement our training. So, for example, if our workshop or course requires specific furniture, types of rooms, and so on, we need to identify them in our planning documents. I'm now going to list all the different types of software and hardware that I use when creating the lesson videos for this course. For hardware, I use a decent laptop for running applications, a portable audio recorder for recording my voice, and an iPad for recording video and making drawings. I also have to have a quiet room with good lighting, electricity, and good internet. For software, I use Google Chrome for researching curriculum on the internet, Word, PowerPoint, OneNote, and Notepad for planning and creating presentations, Photoshop and Illustrator for creating and editing graphics, Teleprompter Plus for iPad for recording scripted video, Camtasia for capturing narration and editing video, After Effects for the beginning and final video effects, and Audacity to make the jazzy sound clip from a sampled song. And of course, UVic also has Moodle installed on servers so that I can upload the videos and create associated learning activities. As you can see, there are many tools that go into making even relatively simple learning products. We now know educational technology is not a clear-cut term to define, and that the technologies required for instructional design are equally complicated based on the number of different applications and tools that designers need to use throughout the design process. Now that you've completed the lesson, your task is to review the resources below this video to see what software you'll need to use to learn in the course. You'll also want to begin installing software you don't have and start practicing these titles using suggested resources and resources you find online. Lastly, you should look under other tasks in the course site for this topic. Thanks for listening, and if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact me via email.